In the quiet hours before the village wakes, when darkness still holds the cobblestone streets in its gentle embrace, there is a bakery. Just one bakery, with its rounded wooden door and flour-dusted windows, where warmth lives and breathes throughout the night. The ovens hum their low, steady song. It is not a melody you would hum yourself, but rather a feeling, a vibration that settles into your bones like the memory of summer sun on bare shoulders. The warmth spreads from the brick ovens, those ancient structures built by hands long turned to dust, and it moves through the air in invisible waves. Slow waves. Patient waves. The kind of warmth that asks nothing of you. Inside the largest oven, dough is rising. It rises so slowly that you cannot see it happen, yet it is always happening. The yeast, those microscopic creatures performing their ancient work, breathe in the dark interior of each loaf. They breathe, and the bread swells. Imperceptibly at first, then with quiet confidence. The dough, which was dense and heavy in the baker's hands hours ago, now begins to fill with tiny pockets of air. Each pocket is a small miracle. Each bubble of carbon dioxide is a whisper of transformation. The warmth continues its patient work. It seeps into the corners of the bakery, where shadows gather and flour dust has settled in soft layers over the years. The wooden countertops, worn smooth by decades of kneading hands, absorb the heat. They hold it the way a favorite blanket holds the warmth of your body, faithfully, without question. In the second oven, smaller rolls are rising. These are different from the loaves. Where the loaves rise with slow dignity, the rolls rise with youthful enthusiasm. They are round and tight, their surfaces taut like small drums. The heat caresses them, and they respond by growing, by reaching upward and outward, by becoming more than they were. Still, there is no hurry. Even their enthusiasm is gentle, measured by the patient temperature of the oven, which does not spike or surge but maintains its steady, ancient warmth. The aroma begins to build. It is not yet the smell of baking bread. That will come later. This is the scent of warmth itself, of flour activated by moisture, of potential held in suspension. It is the smell of yeast waking, of sugar beginning its slow dissolution, of butter softening into the dough. If you were to breathe deeply here, in this moment, you would smell promise. You would smell tomorrow's breakfast being born in the dark. The flour dust hangs in the air like very slow snow. Each particle catches what little light filters through the windows, the distant stars, the sleeping street lamps, and glimmers momentarily before settling. The dust does not fall quickly. It drifts, suspended in the warm currents rising from the ovens, caught in invisible eddies of heated air. A single particle might take minutes to travel from the height of your shoulder to the floor. And when it lands, it does so softly, joining the fine white powder that covers every surface with a whisper-thin layer. The dough continues to rise. In the first oven, you could place your hand above a loaf, not touching, never touching, and feel the warmth radiating upward. The surface of the dough is smooth, stretched tight over the expanding interior. Small beads of moisture form on the surface, catching the oven's glow like tiny jewels. These droplets are the breath of the bread, the evidence of life happening slowly in the heat. Time moves differently here. Without clocks or urgency, without the need to be anywhere or do anything, time becomes soft around the edges. An hour might pass, or it might be 10 minutes. The darkness outside holds steady. The village sleeps. And in the bakery, the ovens continue their work, patient as stones, warm as heartbeats. There are 3 ovens in this bakery. The first, the largest, holds the sourdough loaves. These are the most patient of all breads, made with starters that have been fed and tended for years, some for decades. The sourdough rises with the wisdom of age, slowly, never rushing, building flavor in every moment of its expansion. The crust, which will later become golden and crisp, is now soft and pale, like the skin of something newborn. The second oven cradles dinner rolls and brioche. These dough portions are enriched with eggs and butter, and they rise with a richness that makes them heavier, denser, but no less beautiful. The butter melts into the dough as it warms, creating layers of flavor that will bloom when the baking truly begins. But that is later. For now, they simply grow, their surfaces becoming glossy, reflecting the oven's gentle light. The third oven holds the pastries. Here, croissants are rising, their laminated layers beginning to separate as the butter between them softens and creates distinct sheets of dough. Each croissant is a small architecture of patience, the dough rolled and folded, again and again, until it contains hundreds of layers. Now, in the warmth, these layers begin to reveal themselves. The pastries puff almost imperceptibly, and if you watched for a very long time, you might see them grow from flat crescent shapes to something with height, with dimension, with promise. The warmth spreads further. It reaches the ceiling, where old wooden beams darken with decades of absorbed heat and flour and sugar. It spreads along the stone floor, which has been walked upon by bakers for over a century, their footsteps wearing shallow depressions in the rocks. The floor is never cold here, not even in the deepest winter. The ovens see to that. The aroma deepens. Now there is a hint of something else beneath the yeast and flour, a caramel note, where sugars begin their slow transformation. It is not yet sweetness, but the idea of sweetness. The promise of it. The air grows thick with this promise, and breathing becomes an act of tasting. Each inhalation brings the bakery deeper into your lungs, until you are as much a part of this warm, rising space as the dough itself. The flour dust continues its endless, gentle falling. It settles on the windowsills, where it will be wiped away by morning, only to settle again the next night. It settles on the baker's apron, hanging on a wooden peg near the door. It settles on the scales and measuring cups, on the wooden spoons worn smooth with use, on the bowls nested inside one another on open shelves. Everything wears this fine white patina, this evidence of the bakery's true work. Inside the ovens, the dough has entered a deeper phase of rising. The yeast, warm and content, multiplies steadily. Each yeast cell divides into 2, and those 2 become 4, and the process continues in an exponential expansion that is nonetheless slow, gentle, unhurried. The yeast feeds on the sugars in the dough, converting them into carbon dioxide and alcohol. Tiny amounts of alcohol that will mostly bake away, but which now contribute to the complex aroma building in the bakery. The loaves in the first oven have swollen to nearly double their original size. Their surfaces are no longer as tight. Instead, they have taken on a relaxed quality, a softness that suggests readiness. But they are not ready yet. They will continue to rise a little more, building strength and structure, before the baker returns to slash their tops with a sharp blade and let them bake into crusty completion. For now, they rest in the warmth, growing, breathing, becoming. The brick walls of the ovens hold heat in their very molecules. These bricks were fired in kilns themselves, hardened by heat, and now they return that favor by holding and distributing warmth evenly throughout their interiors. The heat does not blast from one direction but surrounds each piece of dough completely, caressing every surface equally. This is why the rising is so even, so perfect. The warmth is omnipresent, ambient, asking nothing but giving everything. Outside, the world continues its patient rotation. Stars wheel slowly overhead. In the village, dreams unspool in the minds of sleeping bakers and shopkeepers, children and elders. But here, in this bakery, there is only warmth and the slow alchemy of transformation. Flour, water, salt, yeast, these simple elements combining in the heat to become something greater than their parts. The aroma has layers now, like the croissants themselves. At the bottom, the foundation, is the smell of warm flour, grainy, comforting, reminiscent of fields of wheat swaying in summer wind. Above that, the tang of yeast, alive and active, a scent that is both sharp and soft at once. Then comes the butter, melting into richness, adding a creamy depth. And finally, at the very top, so faint you might miss it, the first hint of that toasted, golden smell that will eventually fill the entire bakery and spill out into the street to wake the village. But that is later. For now, the smells are still soft, still developing, still building upon one another in slow accretion. The flour dust catches the warmth as it drifts. Each particle is warmed by its journey through the air, tumbling slowly in the convection currents that rise from the ovens like invisible springs. The dust makes the air visible in certain lights. When a single ray of starlight finds its way through the window, you can see the air itself, textured and alive with these tiny white motes. Time continues its soft unwinding. Minutes accumulate like the layers in croissant dough, one upon another, creating something substantial through patient repetition. There is no clock visible in this bakery. The baker knows time by feel, by scent, by the way the dough looks and sounds when pressed with a gentle finger. Time measured in rises and rests, in proofs and folds. The dinner rolls in the second oven have achieved a beautiful roundness. They sit in their baking pan, each roll pressed against its neighbors, and as they rise, they push gently against one another, creating that beloved pattern of tearable segments. The tops of the rolls are smooth and domed, and they glisten slightly with the egg wash that was brushed over them. The egg proteins are just beginning to react to the warmth, laying the foundation for what will become a golden, glossy crust. The sourdough loaves have developed a skin now, a very thin, translucent layer on their surfaces that formed as the outer dough dried slightly in the oven's warmth. This skin is delicate, nearly invisible, but it will help the loaves hold their shape as they rise. Beneath this skin, the interior of each loaf is a galaxy of bubbles, each one expanding slowly, the gluten network stretching to accommodate the growth, the structure becoming at once stronger and more delicate. The warmth does not waver. It is constant as a heartbeat, steady as breath. The ovens were lit hours ago, and they have reached their perfect temperature, not too hot, not too cool, but precisely the warmth needed for this slow rising. The baker, wherever they are sleeping, knows these ovens intimately. They know how long it takes for the bricks to heat, how the temperature settles and holds, how to read the oven's moods by the sound of their burning wood or the smell of their smoke. But now there is no smoke. The fires have settled into deep beds of glowing coals, red and orange at their hearts, grey at their edges. These coals radiate heat without flame, without flicker, providing the even, sustained warmth that the rising dough requires. The coals will burn for hours more, slowly diminishing, and the baker will return before they cool too much, adding just enough wood to maintain the perfect temperature. The croissants in the third oven are performing their delicate magic. Between each layer of dough is a thin sheet of butter, and as the butter warms, it begins to steam slightly. This steam pushes the layers apart, not violently, but gently, creating the space that will eventually become those crisp, flaky layers that shatter at the first bite. But for now, the butter is simply soft, malleable, and the dough stretches around it patiently. The aroma has become intoxicating without becoming overwhelming. It is pervasive but not oppressive. It fills the space the way water fills a vessel, completely, naturally, finding every corner and cavity. If you were to stand in the doorway of this bakery, the smell would roll over you like a warm wave, and you would close your eyes involuntarily, breathing deeply, feeling something in your chest loosen and relax. The flour dust has created a fine layer on everything, a white softness that mutes colors and edges. The rustic wooden shelves, which are actually quite dark with age, appear lighter under their flour coating. The copper bowls gleam less brightly, softened by the white patina. Even the air seems softer, gentler, as the flour particles diffuse and scatter what little light exists. The dough continues rising. This is its purpose, its nature, its joy, if dough can be said to have joy. The yeast cells multiply in their warm environment, finding perfect conditions for their work. They consume sugars and produce gas, and the gas inflates the dough slowly, steadily, like the gentlest of balloons. There is no violence in this rising, no sudden expansion. Just persistent, patient growth. The heat from the ovens radiates in concentric circles, strongest near the oven doors, gentler as it spreads toward the edges of the room. Near the ovens, the air is quite warm, too warm for comfort if you stood there long. But 3 steps away, the temperature is perfect. Enveloping. The kind of warmth you want to sink into, like a hot bath that's cooled to just the right temperature. The bricks of the oven walls glow with stored heat. Touch one, carefully, from the outside, and you would feel warmth radiating through the thick stone. These bricks have absorbed decades of heat, stored it in their mineral composition, and they release it now with the same patience with which they received it. They are neither generous nor stingy with their warmth. They simply are warm, and that is enough. Inside the first oven, the sourdough loaves have reached their nearly final rise. They are full and round, their surfaces taut but not tight, ready but not impatient. The starter that lives within them, that culture of wild yeast and beneficial bacteria, has created a complex network of flavors that will only fully express themselves during baking. But hints of that complexity are already present in the aroma. A slight tanginess beneath the wheaty sweetness, a depth that speaks of time and patience and care. The brioche rolls have become glossy. The butter and eggs in their dough have created a richness that shows on their surfaces as a slight sheen. They are heavier than plain rolls would be, more substantial, and they rise more slowly because of that richness. But they rise surely, confidently, becoming plump and soft and promising. Time continues. Outside, perhaps an hour has passed since we entered this bakery. Perhaps two. The darkness remains, though it may have lightened from black to the very deepest blue. The stars may have shifted slightly in their eternal rotation. But inside the bakery, such changes are imperceptible. Here, there is only warmth and rising and the slow accumulation of aroma. The flour dust floats and falls in an endless cycle. The warmth rising from the ovens lifts it up, and gravity pulls it down, and it drifts in the space between these two forces, suspended, peaceful, in no hurry to reach its destination. Some particles might dance in the air for hours, catching and riding each warm current, before finally settling on the floor or a shelf or the curve of a copper bowl. The aroma deepens further. Now, beneath all the other scents, there is the smell of the ovens themselves, the bricks holding decades of absorbed flavors, the faint wood smoke from the coals, the mineral scent of heated stone. These base notes support all the other smells the way a foundation supports a house, invisibly, essentially, without fanfare. The croissants have puffed noticeably now. Where they were relatively flat crescents before, they now have dimension, height, volume. The layers are separating, creating the flaky structure that makes croissants what they are. But this separation happens so slowly that you could watch a single croissant for many minutes and not see it move. Yet it is moving. It is always moving, growing, becoming. Inside each piece of dough, the gluten network stretches and holds, stretches and holds. Gluten is the protein that gives bread its structure, its ability to rise and hold air. When flour meets water and is worked by hands or time, the gluten molecules link together, forming long, elastic chains. Now, as the dough rises, these chains stretch to accommodate the expanding bubbles of carbon dioxide. The gluten is strong but not rigid. It gives where it needs to give, holds where it needs to hold, creating a structure that is at once delicate and robust. The warmth wraps around everything. It is in the air you breathe, making each inhalation feel slightly thick, slightly sweet. It rises from the floor, which has been warmed by proximity to the ovens. It hangs from the ceiling, trapped by the weight of cooler air outside. The entire bakery is a pocket of warmth in the cool night, a haven, a sanctuary. The dough breathes. This is not metaphor, the dough truly breathes, in its way. The yeast cells consume oxygen and release carbon dioxide, and this exchange of gases is a form of respiration, a form of breathing. So the loaves and rolls and croissants are alive in this moment, powered by living organisms, engaged in the ancient process of fermentation that has fed humanity for thousands of years. The flour dust accumulates. On the windowsill, the layer is perhaps a millimeter thick now, a soft, fine powder that would puff into the air at the slightest touch. On the floor near the ovens, where it is warmest, the flour has been there so long that it has absorbed humidity from the air, clumping slightly, becoming less like dust and more like the finest sand on a beach. The aroma has become a presence. It is no longer something you smell, it is something you exist within. It surrounds you completely, fills you, becomes inseparable from the experience of being in this space. Your clothes will smell of it. Your hair will hold the scent. Days later, you might catch a whiff of it unexpectedly, and you will be transported back to this moment, this warm, quiet, patient moment. The sourdough loaves are ready for their final proof, though they do not yet know it. They have risen to their full height, their interiors honeycombed with perfectly distributed bubbles, their surfaces relaxed and ready to be slashed with the baker's lame, that razor-sharp blade that will create controlled tears in the surface, allowing steam to escape during baking and creating the characteristic ears and ridges of well-baked sourdough. But that is still to come. For now, they simply rest in their warmth, holding their shape, maintaining their temperature, existing in the perfect stasis of the risen but not yet baked. The dinner rolls touch each other now. As each roll expanded, it pressed against its neighbors, and they pushed back with equal gentleness, and now they are united mass, individual yet connected. When they bake, they will fuse slightly at these points of contact, and later they can be torn apart, each roll pulling away from its brothers and sisters with a soft, satisfying resistance. The brioche dough has a particular quality now, a softness that is almost custard-like. The richness of the eggs and butter has created something tender and delicate. Press a finger gently into one of these rolls, and it would slowly spring back, leaving a temporary indentation that gradually fills in. This is the sign of good proofing. Dough that is risen but not overrisen, active but not exhausted, ready but patient. The warmth continues unabated. The coals in the oven fires burn steadily, their red glow pulsing slightly as air moves through them, but never flaring, never dying. They are in perfect balance, consuming wood at exactly the rate needed to maintain their temperature. This is the baker's art, not just making dough, but managing fire, understanding heat, knowing when to add fuel and when to let the coals settle and stabilize. Outside, the village remains deeply asleep. In houses and apartments, people dream their dreams, turn in their beds, breathe softly in the darkness. Some dream of bread, perhaps, their sleeping minds picking up the aroma that has begun to seep from the bakery into the street, moving on the slight breeze, finding its way through cracks and gaps, announcing that morning, though still hours away, is nevertheless coming. The flour dust has created landscapes on every horizontal surface. On the broad wooden kneading table, the flour has drifted into small dunes and valleys, shaped by the air currents from the ovens. On the scales, the flour sits in the pan, outlining its edges, making visible something that would otherwise be clear. On the floor, in corners where the air barely moves, the flour has accumulated more thickly, and it captures footprints like snow, holding the ghost of the baker's last steps before they left the dough to rise in solitude. The croissants approach their perfect state of proof. They are no longer flat but not yet as tall as they will become during baking. The butter layers inside them have softened completely, becoming pliable, ready to steam and separate during the fierce heat of actual baking. But that fierce heat is not here yet. This is still the gentle heat, the nurturing heat, the warmth that coaxes and encourages rather than demands and transforms. The aroma has developed sweet notes now, not from added sugar necessarily, but from the natural sugars in the flour being broken down and transformed by enzymatic activity. Amylase, The enzyme that breaks down starches into simple sugars is active at these warm temperatures, creating sweetness that wasn't there before. This sweetness is subtle, complex, nothing like refined sugar. It is the sweetness of grain, of wheat, of the earth itself. The yeast continues its work tirelessly. Each cell is a microscopic factory, converting sugar into carbon dioxide and energy, multiplying, filling the dough with gas, creating the rise. The yeast asks nothing but warmth and food, and in return it gives texture, flavor, lightness, life. It is an ancient partnership, this relationship between human and yeast, predating written history, reaching back to the earliest days of agriculture. Time accumulates in this warm space. Each minute adds to the last, building a tower of moments, each one essentially identical to the one before it but somehow adding up to something meaningful. The dough is not the same as it was an hour ago, though it has experienced nothing but continuous, unchanging warmth. Change happens slowly here, but it happens surely. The ovens hum. It is the sound of heat moving through air, of warm bricks expanding microscopically, of coals settling in their beds. It is a sound so low and constant that it becomes like silence, a background against which other sounds, the settling of the building, the distant call of a night bird, become noticeable. The flour dust continues its patient fall. A particle that lifted into the air when the baker was kneading dough hours ago is only now settling onto the floor, having traveled upward on warm currents, drifted laterally on subtle air movements, and finally succumbed to gravity. Its journey has taken it around the room, past the ovens, up to the ceiling beams, and back down. It is just one of millions of particles, each on its own slow journey. Inside the first oven, the sourdough has reached its peak. It cannot rise much more without becoming overproofed, without the gluten network becoming overstretched and weak. But the temperature is calibrated perfectly, warm enough to keep the yeast active and the dough rising, but not so warm that the process accelerates beyond the baker's carefully calculated timeline. The loaves will hold at this point, stable and patient, until the baker returns. The brioche rolls glisten. The egg wash on their surfaces has dried slightly in the warmth, becoming sticky, ready to transform into that golden, shiny crust that makes brioche so visually appealing. Underneath this glazed exterior, the dough is tender and fine-grained, enriched to the point of being almost cake-like in texture, yet still fundamentally bread. The warmth has permeated everything. The wooden spoons hanging on hooks near the ovens are warm to the touch. The stone floor, though not hot, is pleasantly warm underfoot. The air itself is warm, wrapping around you like a blanket, entering your lungs as a gentle heat that spreads through your chest. Even the walls, thick stone, and brick and plaster, have absorbed warmth and radiate it back into the room. The aroma has become impossibly complex now. There are dozens of volatile compounds in the air, esters and alcohols, organic acids, and aldehydes, each contributing its own note to the symphony of scent. Individually, they might smell of fruit, or butter, or grass, or caramel. Together, they create that unmistakable, irreplaceable scent of rising bread dough, a smell that speaks to something deep in human memory and desire. The croissants have separated fully now into their layers. Where there was once relatively solid dough, there are now hundreds of distinct layers, each separated from the next by a thin film of butter. This lamination is what will create the characteristic flakiness of the finished pastry, but for now it exists only as potential, as structure waiting to be revealed by heat. Time stretches. How long have we been here? An hour. 2. The darkness outside offers no clues. The ovens burn with the same steady heat. The flour dust drifts with the same patient slowness. The dough rises with the same gentle insistence. Everything is continuous, ongoing, part of an eternal present that seems to have no beginning and no end. The yeast populations in each piece of dough are immense now. Billions of individual cells in each loaf, trillions across all the dough in the bakery. And yet they are invisible, microscopic, known only by their effects. The rise, the aroma, the transformation of dense dough into something light and airy and alive with possibility. The flour dust has created a patina on everything, a soft focus that makes the bakery look like a memory of itself or a dream. Hard edges are softened. Dark colors are lightened. Everything takes on a gentle, ethereal quality, as if the bakery exists slightly out of phase with the regular world, in a pocket dimension where only warmth and rising and the slow magic of fermentation matter. The bricks of the ovens continue to radiate heat. They have done this every night for decades, perhaps for a century or more. They have absorbed the heat of countless fires, supported the rise of countless loaves, witnessed the transformation of flour and water into bread innumerable times. They are patient, these bricks. They ask nothing. They simply do their work, night after night, year after year, holding heat and distributing it evenly, creating the conditions for bread to rise and bake. The sourdough loaves have developed a particular scent now, tangy, complex, with hints of acetic acid that speak to the bacterial portion of the sourdough culture. The wild yeasts and lactobacillus bacteria work in concert, each contributing different flavors, creating a depth and complexity that cannot be achieved with commercial yeast alone. This is old bread, bread made the way it was made before industrial fermentation, bread that takes time and patience and an understanding that some things cannot be rushed. The dinner rolls have achieved perfect roundness. They are spheres of dough, each one identical to its neighbors, pressed together in their pan, rising in unison. There is something satisfying about their uniformity, their simple geometry. They are uncomplicated bread, honest bread, bread that doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. Flour, water, salt, yeast, warmth, time. The warmth wraps closer now. Perhaps you've been standing in this bakery for so long that you've become accustomed to it, and it feels less like external heat and more like your own body temperature. The bakery and you have reached an equilibrium. You are warm because the bakery is warm. The bakery is warm because the ovens are warm. The ovens are warm because the fire burns. The fire burns because the wood gives itself to flame. Everything is connected, everything flows into everything else. The flour dust continues to drift and fall. It will never stop, not as long as flour is used in this bakery, not as long as hands knead dough and work shifts and breaths disturb the air. It is eternal, this dust, regenerating constantly, settling and being stirred up and settling again, the breath and heartbeat of the bakery itself. The aroma has reached its peak complexity. It cannot become more layered, more nuanced, without the addition of actual baking heat. This is the scent of proofing, of rising, of potential waiting to be actualized. It is intoxicating and comforting in equal measure, promising satisfaction without yet delivering it, holding you in a state of pleasant anticipation. Inside the ovens, the dough has entered a state of perfect readiness. Not overproofed, not underproofed, but exactly right. The baker, with their decades of experience and their intuitive understanding of fermentation, has calculated everything perfectly. The amount of yeast, the temperature of the water, the warmth of the ovens, the duration of the rise, all of it has been calibrated to bring the dough to this exact point at this exact time. The croissants wait in their perfection. They are ready to be baked, to have their butter steam and their layers separate fully, to become golden and crisp and flaky. But for now, they rest in their warm environment, holding their shape, maintaining their structure, patient as everything else in this warm, still space. Time continues to pass, but does it matter? The clock on the wall, if there is one, is hidden in shadow, its face obscured by the gentle darkness. Time here is measured in rises and rests, in the slow accumulation of aroma, in the patient transformation of ingredients into something greater than themselves. The warmth persists. The ovens burn. The dough rises. The flour drifts. The aroma builds and builds. And in this moment, in this warm, quiet, patient moment before dawn, everything is perfect. Everything is exactly as it should be. The bakery breathes with you. As you inhale, you take in the warmth, the aroma, the very essence of rising bread. As you exhale, you add your own warmth, your own breath, to the space. You are part of this now, part of the cycle of warmth and transformation, part of the patient magic happening in this small building while the village sleeps. The flour dust settles on your shoulders, light as thought, gentle as snow. You are being incorporated into the bakery, becoming part of its landscape, dusted with the same white powder that covers everything else. You belong here, in this moment, in this warmth. The sourdough loaves rest in their final proof. The dinner rolls press against each other in their pan. The brioche gleams softly. The croissants hold their layers in perfect suspension. Everything waits. Everything is ready. But nothing hurries. Nothing demands. The warmth continues. The rising continues. The patient work of yeast continues. And you, standing in this warm space, breathing this aromatic air, watching the flour drift and settle, watching the steam rise gently from the ovens, feeling the heat wrap around you. You are exactly where you need to be. There is nowhere else. Nothing else matters. Only this warmth. Only this gentle, persistent rising. Only this moment, extended indefinitely, held in the embrace of heat and aroma and the soft, eternal falling of flour dust. The bakery holds you. The warmth holds you. And in this holding, there is peace. There is rest. There is the promise that morning will come, that bread will bake, that the world will wake, but not yet. Not yet. For now, there is only this: warmth, rising, aroma, dust, peace. And it is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. Let the warmth carry you into sleep.